In chapter 2, verse 1, Zechariah sees a man with a measuring line, and this man is going to measure Jerusalem to see how wide it is and how long it is. So there is a plan of expansion in Jerusalem. And verse 4 reads that Jerusalem will be inhabited without walls because of the multitude of men and cattle within it. The walls protected the city, but Jerusalem will not need defense walls because God's presence will guarantee its safety and security. Verses 6 through 9, then the Lord calls for the remaining exiles to return. Remember in the book of Ezra, roughly 40,000, 50,000 exiles returned under Zerubbabel. That was the first group of exiles that returned. Some chose to stay behind in Babylon because living conditions were better than in Jerusalem. Remember, the Babylonians burned the temple, they broke down the wall of Jerusalem and burned its buildings. So the majority of the Jews living outside of the promised land did not want to return. Even though King Cyrus, the Persian king, said they could return, many chose not to. So the Lord calls his people to return. This is not only literal, but also figuratively. Literally, God is calling them to return so that they may escape judgment that's going to fall on Babylon. But figuratively, this is God calling them to return to him, to change their course. Remember our highlighted verse, chapter 1, verse 3, return to me that I may return to you. So verses 10 through 12, the Lord declares the future of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is to be rebuilt, and the Lord will reign there in person. And this is so beautiful because God fulfilled his promise. The Word became incarnate in Jesus Christ. In the New Testament, John 1:14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So I'm going to read verse 11 of chapter 2. Many nations will join themselves to the Lord in that day and will become my people. Then I will dwell in your midst, and you will know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. Their plans to rebuild will be for the day when many nations will come to the God of the Jews and will be his people. And the many nations represent the Gentiles that will come to know the Lord. This is the fulfillment of the promise to Abraham in Genesis 12. I will make you a great nation, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. That's why a man was measuring Jerusalem. The city's population will overflow to the point that it will be as though it had no walls, overflowing with both Jew and Gentile. Chapter 3, verse 1, then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. So Joshua is the high priest. As a high priest, he represents the people before God. Satan is standing ready to accuse him of their sins. See, the high priest stands in the place of the people that he represents. So he stands there representing the nation's sins, and Satan stands ready to accuse him. But in verse 2, the Lord rebukes Satan. It's just such a beautiful message that Satan has no power over the Savior. In verse 3, Joshua, the high priest, stood in filthy garments. Now the filthy garments symbolize the sins of the people, which he bears as their representative. Verse 4 is the removal of the filthy garments. I'm going to read from the Amplified Version so you have a better understanding of the text. See, I have caused your wickedness to be taken away from you, and I will clothe and beautify you with rich robes of forgiveness. Joshua's filthy garments are removed, meaning that the people's sins are forgiven. We talked about the name Yeshua or Joshua, meaning the Lord saves, as a mediator, a representative of the people, wearing the sins of the people. Those sins are removed, the garments removed, and clothed with rich robes of forgiveness. Verses 8 through 10 are greater things to come. Joshua is a sign of the coming servant, which the text calls the branch. Verse 8, you and the fellow priests are a symbol of things to come. Soon I am going to bring my servant the branch. That title, the branch, means descended from David. Prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah used the same term, and I have those verses listed. That's Jeremiah 23:5 and Isaiah 11:1.